Okay, so the real question is, how did the Strix Vega 56 OC edition hold up from long-term testing? For reference, I upgraded from an R9 270 Tri-X. When I first got the Vega 56, I was blown away with it, and at the time it was only paired with a Core i5 760, overclocked at 4.2 GHz stable. The difference between the two cards was absolutely staggering, and I was pleasantly surprised when I went to overclock it, and I ended up pushing it too far. But the graphics driver automatically reset, and AMD told me in the software that it had crashed and was reset to default. This was great, as before with the R9 270 Tri-X, when overclocking, it usually meant that a full hard PC reset and crash would happen if I pushed it too far, or if something went a little bit wrong. I used the card for various things beyond gaming. I started rendering videos with it, and was again blown away, finding around a 75% decrease in render times. It was like I had needed glasses my entire life, and suddenly I had them. That's how big the difference was. I later upgraded the rest of my computer, and was yet again astonished at the difference that had been made, as I clearly had a huge bottleneck with the Core i5 760, even with it overclocked. On the new X570 motherboard with a Ryzen 5 3600 and 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, CL14, and a 512 M.2 NVMe solid state drive, it really became clear how much I had really needed an upgrade. With the Vega 56 no longer bottlenecked by any old hardware, I decided it was time to really start getting it to compete with the RTX 2070 series cards, and did the soft power play table mods, which allowed me to dump virtually unlimited power into the card. Upon testing, I was taken aback by how much a fairly simple overclock had changed this virtually brand new card into a completely different beast, all the while still on air cooling and keeping temps well below 90 degrees Celsius. It amazes me that I still have more potential in this card that I can tap into simply by swapping to the Vega 64 BIOS, and then further by water cooling it. I have little doubt that I could approach the RTX 2080 levels of performance if I really tried to. All that being said, the last year with this card has not been without its frustrations. With every new driver iteration, I had to redo the soft power play tables mod, which wasn't wholly unexpected, but what was, is that after 3 or 4 drivers updates, my automatic driver reset on crash functionality had altogether completely disappeared. This was highly irritating, as I had gotten used to being able to push it to the limit and not have my computer completely restart after a crash. Even more annoying, as before when it would crash while in game, the game would continue to run, and when the driver would reset, I was still in the game. Now, you just get a black screen for 15 to 20 seconds, and if the computer doesn't hard crash, the game would still be running, but you wouldn't see anything but your desktop. There would be 0 in-game graphics, requiring you to restart the game. I also ended up getting into 3D scene modeling and rendering, and character modeling and rendering during this time, and I felt like I got smacked in the face. I had this fairly new high-end graphics card, and about 90% of the program's renderers were not compatible with OpenCL and AMD ProRender without some kind of obvious paywall. So I got stuck rendering with my R5 3600 CPU, which was dog slow compared to a GPU render. We're talking like 8 to 10 hours for a fairly simple and well-lit scene. Now that's not really on the card as much as it is on me, in the lack of open and wide support for AMD's ProRender software. So I guess you live and learn. Last month, I started pushing the overclock some more, and I hit a wall, though not one that I could particularly define, as card temps seemed to be well inside the green, thanks to the absolutely massive heatsink on the Strix version of the Vega 56. So, with with thermals eliminated, I assumed it must be a power issue, but after using both a 650 watt and a 1000 watt power supply and seeing no change, this too had been eliminated as the problem. So I decided that I needed to do some more research on this specific series of Vega 56. And it turns out, after a lot of reading on Reddit, that there was a manufacturing problem with the first couple runs of these cards. The thermal pad on the VRM heatsink, was not applied properly and does not cover the whole of all of the chips properly. A simple enough fix for someone with my expertise and skills, but part of me was extremely disappointed. This was, after all, a nearly $600 or $700 card when it was brand new. Granted, I paid far less than that for mine and got 3 games with it, but to a normal consumer, having this issue with the VRM thermal pad would be completely unacceptable. In conclusion, I found the card to be great. It vastly improved how well I was able to run games and render videos. If I had to do it all over again, I would probably still buy the card, as any of the downsides were fully offset by how much performance you can squeeze out of the Vega architecture. I would still recommend it over any variant of the Vega 64, and as long as you aren't going to be doing any 3D model rendering, I would recommend it over the 2060 or even the 2060 Super for sure. That is to say, there are some extensions for ProRender for programs like Blender, but in my experience, they were not nearly as good as the RTX NVIDIA counterparts. If you're into retro gaming, I strongly suggest that you check out my brother's channel over at Super Jeremy World, where he talks about and unboxes plenty of stuff relating to retro gaming. Thanks for joining us on BlusTech today. If you liked this video, click like. If you didn't, you know what to do. And hey, smash that subscribe button so you can get notified about any upcoming videos. And don't forget to check me out on Patreon. And if you had a Vega Strix card, why don't you give me a shout out in the comments and let me know what you think.